New Mexico, and Flagstaff, Arizona. This is a police sketch of the suspect in one of the nastiest murder cases New York police have had come their way in a long time. The killer police are looking for is called the .44 caliber killer because of the weapon he has used. Robert Hager reports.
In a neighborhood of the Bronx called Pelham Bay and in Forest Hills near the famous tennis club, the killer has struck 6 times since last summer, and 5 are dead. Most of them pretty young women, shot at close range on the sidewalk or in parked cars. 18-year-old Donna Lauria was the first, killed last July. Then Christina Freund, 26, a secretary, killed in January. Virginia Voskorician, a 20-year-old co-ed, killed in March. And Valentina Suriani, 20, killed with her boyfriend, Alexander Esau, in April. In each case, the killer used a gun similar to this, a modern version of the old .44 caliber pistol used in the days of the Wild West. The killer has taunted authorities by writing 2 letters. Police are convinced the letters are real. Both were signed Son of Sam. One was left for police, the other was sent to Jimmy Breslin, a widely read columnist for the New York Daily News. This is a photocopy of the letter sent to Breslin. Here the killer says, "Mr. Breslin, sir, don't think that because you haven't heard from me for a while that I went to sleep. No, rather I am still here, like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest, anxious to please Sam. I love my work. Now the void has been filled."
The letter was very eerie. I mean, then you know that he read something that you wrote, and that somewhere out there he's reading again what you wrote. And it's one of those crimes has been, I guess, man has been visited upon man throughout the ages. A demented killer, and you don't know how to stop him.
At the end of the letter, the killer wrote, "Not knowing what the future holds, I shall say farewell, and I will see you at the next job. Or should I say, you will see my handiwork at the next job. Remember, Ms. Lauria," a reference to the first victim, "thank you." Then, before adding some footnotes, he signed, "In their blood and from the gutter, Sam's Creation, 44. The New York Police Department's Dr. Harvey Schlossberg, one of the nation's better-known criminal psychologists, believes the killer has sexual inadequacies. As for the references to Sam,
the way I see the relationship to Sam as the creator, as the driving force, as the hungry that can't be satisfied, I see the gun as Sam. Sam is the weapon which becomes the substitute phallic symbol.
On the envelope of the letter, the killer has drawn a sign, including the biological marks for male and female, and the letter S. The symbol only adds to the mystery of all this. So far, police say they're not even close to solving the case of the .44 caliber killer. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
In Israel today, Menachem Begin finally put together his government.
In New York, the search continues for the .44 caliber killer who has come to be known as the Son of Sam, the object of one of the biggest manhunts in this city's history. In the past year, the killer, believed to be a young man, has killed 5 people and wounded 4. His victims, mostly young women with shoulder-length dark hair, usually shot at very close range while sitting in parked cars at night. They've been shot with a .44 caliber bulldog revolver, an especially deadly weapon. NBC News correspondent Robert Hager has been following the case. He's with us this morning with the Chief of Detectives for New York City, John L. Keenan, and Dr. Harvey Schlossberg, Director of the Department's Psychological Services. Bob, why don't you bring us up to date on just what's going on in the case right now?
Thank you, Tom. The case has been one that's not only attracted a lot of public attention here, but also caused a lot of genuine fear in the communities involved. The police are trying to do all they can about the case, and we've prepared a report on that.
This is headquarters for one of the most intense manhunts in the history of New York, a search for the .44 caliber killer. Operating out of this office, over 50 of the city's best detectives pore over clues and run down leads.
All right, so he saw the composite and he may know the identity. Okay, he states that this informant has been reliable in the past, huh?
On the wall are snapshots of the victims, most of them pretty girls with long, dark hair. And photos of the murder scenes, the parked cars and lonely sidewalks where the killer has struck in post-midnight hours. Here, too, police are trying to trace the ownership of every snub-nosed .44 in the country, an estimated 28,000 guns. By night, police saturate neighborhoods where the killer has struck. Disguised as regular neighborhood toughs, they cruise in unmarked cars and check people who are still out long after midnight.
How you doing? Police officers? Nope. You have some ID, maybe?
Yeah.
On this night, there was a brief chase after a report of a driver acting suspiciously, trying to evade police. Within moments, the driver was surrounded by a half-dozen unmarked police cars and a dozen officers. The man was ordered from the car and questioned. Officers searched through the trunk until, satisfied, they told the man he could go, leaving with this explanation.
Man, it's everybody. It's not you, it's everybody. That's all we're trying to do. Nobody wants to embarrass you for nothing, okay?
Fine. I'll take that from what it's worth, and I can agree.
We have to do our job this way. It's tough. We never did it this way. We got to do it this way now.
And I understand.
Okay?
Fine.
It was another false alarm in a case that's produced hundreds of false alarms, but each has to be checked out in the hope that the .44 caliber killer can be stopped before he strikes again.
Well, the .44 killer still is at large. John Keenan, who is the chief of New York City Police Detectives, it was July 29th, 1976 that he first struck. How much closer are you to apprehending Son of Sam these days, or is he just totally an elusive character?
He's still an elusive character, but in the sense that we have a large force of detectives doing an investigation on the case, and in the sense that we're getting a lot of information and bits and leads from the public, all of which are being tracked down and either being eliminated, or if it's interesting enough, we continue with that particular piece of information and investigating it. We feel that we're making ground, we're covering ground, and making progress in the case.
Do you have any good leads, Chief Keenan? Any particular people under surveillance, or ones that you feel where you could be getting close?
Since we organized the task force, we have received about 2,800 complaints, not complaints, but bits of information, telephone calls, letters and visits from people. Many of these, of course, were discarded after initial investigation, but a number of those pieces of information are still interesting enough to us to keep working on the particular person involved, so that I would hesitate to characterize these people as suspects, but there are a number of people who we are still interested in, and we are keeping tabs on them.
Dr. Schlossberg, Son of Sam has emerged in recent weeks to write letters to both the police department and or to leave at least a note at the scene of one of his crimes, and to write a letter to columnist Jimmy Breslin. What kind of a psychological profile have you been able to come up with on
Well,
this
I think the leaving of letters in and of itself is kind of a switch. I think at this point his original reason for committing the crimes has changed. I think now he's into the kind of enjoying the publicity aspect of this. I see it as a kind of a becoming a cat and mouse thing. In a sense, he visualizes himself the Moriarty of the day, outsmarting the police, leaving them clues, and the police can't get anywhere. And so the game has kind of changed for him. In a sense, it's kind of a secondary gain now. Originally, the pleasure was in the killing. The pleasure now is in the outsmarting of the police.
Dr. Schlossberg, what sort of a man do you think you're going to find when and if you find and arrest this fellow?
Well, I think contrary to what most people believe, you're not going to find anybody with red eyes foaming at the mouth. You're going to find a very normal-looking, functioning individual that has these periods. I guess we kind of call them transient breaks. It's kind of like a pressure cooker. He goes along fine, functioning normal, obviously not calling attention to himself when the pressure just gets too much and he kind of flips his lid for that period of time.
So he's a schizophrenic of some kind, because he describes himself as son of Sam, and he says Sam has a great thirst for blood and so on, as if there's another figure at work in his life.
Well, again, I think popular belief is that someplace there's a little old man named Sam who's directing this operation. My feeling is that somehow Sam perhaps symbolically stands for the revolver. This is the thing that can't be satisfied. No matter how many times it discharges, the level of tension remains the same.
Chief Keenan, what do you know about the way this man operates? Do you feel he selects his victims in advance, or how does he go about his?
We don't believe he selects the victims in advance. The way he operates is apparently he prowls by car. He roams the neighborhood by car, and when he sees a likely target, gets out and stalks them by foot. He is, if the couple, generally is shot at couples sitting in parked cars, and he approaches the car from the rear and shoots through the window. On several occasions, he's approached a person on foot, asked directions, and then shot at close range. The last shooting, as you know, occurred outside a discotheque, which is a likely place for couples to come out of. It's quite possible that he is looking at these locations to select targets.
Dr. Schlossberg raised the possibility that he's now engaged in some kind of a public game of cat and mouse with the police department. Do you think that the extraordinary amount of attention that this case has been getting, and with good reason has been getting attention, because he has become a great threat to public safety of people in Queens and in the Bronx especially, do you think that that has helped or hindered your case? After all, it has kind of smoked him out.
I think the publicity has been helpful. If we think in terms alone of the number of bits of information and tips we get from the public, many of them are very interesting, telling us about people who are members of their family or people that are acquaintances of theirs who may fit this description. These things we wouldn't have gotten without publicity. We got well over 900 calls and letters since June 26th last week.
You had a theory before about the publicity and whether it...
I think the publicity is beneficial in a sense that it may give him this substitute. I would personally prefer he gets his gratification through the press rather than having to kill. And I think this, he can make this substitute successfully. Dropping letters is better than shooting people.
Gentlemen, thank you very much, and we wish you, of course, the best luck in this case that goes on now. It's time for a station break.
The walkout. A killer who has roamed the boroughs of New York for the past year struck again over the past weekend. He critically wounded a young couple as they sat in their automobile early Sunday in Brooklyn. Here's Robert Hager with the details.
The killer's 8th attack in just over 12 months came on this lonely street in Brooklyn. Police poured over the car where the young couple was shot and said fragments of bullets showed they were fired from the same .44 caliber pistol that had wounded 6 other New Yorkers and left 5 dead. Aided by light from a full moon, 3 or 4 eyewitnesses said they got a look at the killer. They described him as 25 to 35 years old, about 5'8" or a little taller. The victims were 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz, wounded critically by a shot in the head, and her date, Robert Violante, also hit in the head. Doctors said he was blinded in one eye. Relatives and friends kept a vigil at the hospital. Anthony Robinson was a friend of Miss Moskowitz.
She was a wonderful person. And she's always thinking of others.
She worried about this guy?
Excuse me?
She
wasn't worried, you know, because she says, you know, I got blonde hair and, you know. I told her, I don't know how many times, to be careful.
Then Robinson addressed the gunman.
First of all, you're sick. You're crazy. You're going around shooting the wrong people.
The investigation goes on, but police aren't sure they're any closer to finding the gunman terrorizing this city. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
Yitzhak Rabin, until a couple of months ago, the Prime Minister of Israel.
jury selection begins. Bob Jimenez, NBC News, Dawson, Georgia.
In the past year, a psychopathic gunman has killed 6 people and wounded 8 others in New York City. He calls himself, and he looks like this, he calls himself Son of Sam, and he is known as the .44 caliber killer because he has always used that kind of handgun. The latest of the killer's victims, a young woman, died tonight in a hospital in New York. Her escort, who got a good look at the gunman, may lose his sight. And the police now know that the killer could strike again, anywhere in New York City, and not just in 2 boroughs as in the past. Robert Hager is on the story.
As the condition of one of the killer's latest 2 victims worsened, the parents of Stacy Moskowitz were summoned to the hospital. This evening, Miss Moskowitz, shown here as she was taken into the hospital yesterday, died of massive brain damage. Her date, Robert Violante, will live. He said he got a good look at the killer, but may never be able to identify him because Violante may have been blinded. New York's Mayor Beam directed that 100 more policemen be added to what's become one of the biggest manhunts in the history of this city.
This would, in essence, put approximately a total of 300 of police personnel on a constant full-time basis just for this investigation.
In Brooklyn, where the latest shooting occurred, detectives drew diagrams of the area and places where people may have caught a glimpse of the killer escaping. Other detectives canvassed door to door, looking for new witnesses or re-interviewing ones they'd already talked to.
According to the witnesses that we've talked to over the past 24 hours, he's a male white, 25 to 35, approximately 5'7" to 5'10", a stocky build, and he had light disheveled hair.
But police still have nothing they'd be willing to describe as a hot lead in the case. In fact, they've been able to rule out about a half-dozen suspects they had previously because all were accounted for and none were in the area of the shooting early Sunday morning. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
The Congressional Conference Committee in Washington wrestling with the big...
It's now 8 minutes and a few seconds after the hour. The .44 caliber killer on the loose in New York for a year and 3 days has claimed another victim, his 6th, the young lady he wounded early Sunday morning. The girl and her boyfriend were sitting in a car in Brooklyn where they were attacked. She died yesterday in a hospital. Robert Hager has the rest of the story.
Stacy Moskowitz, a pretty 20-year-old blonde, became the 6th to die in the killer's string of attacks. At the hospital, her father was stunned.
I still tell you, that's something very dear to me. Great kid.
Miss Moskowitz died of massive brain damage. Her mother referred to that.
And she would have been a vegetable had she lived. And my daughter loved life too much. And she would never have wanted it that way. And she lived with dignity, and she died with dignity. But most important, of the people that an animal should snuff away a life of a young girl, blind a young boy, and has killed others and will probably go on killing. An animal like this has to be caught.
At the scene of the shooting, detectives plotted the area, charting places where witnesses could have seen the killer escape. Other detectives canvassed door to door, looking for eyewitnesses, re-interviewing people they'd talked to before. New York's Mayor Beam announced 100 additional police will be assigned to the case.
This would, in essence, put approximately a total of 300 of police personnel on a constant full-time basis just for this investigation.
But police say they still don't have anything they'd describe as a hot lead in the case. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
There are reports this morning that George Wallace, the governor of Alabama,
The vote was mainly party line, and later the committee approved the bill supported by the president. In New York City, the .44 caliber killer is still at large. The police are no closer than ever to catching the madman who has killed 6 people and wounded 7. Here is Robert Hager with the latest details.
Residential areas all over New York are deserted after midnight now. Fear is spreading as the killer moves into different neighborhoods. By day, it's common to see young women with kerchiefs over their hair or hair pinned up because most of the victims had long hair. Discotheques are losing business. Young people are afraid the killer may select his victims at these places. The most recent attack was early Sunday. The father of Robert Violante, wounded in that attack, has now told his son he may be blind.
I gave him the news about his eyes yesterday, and he accepted it. He accepted it like a man. Bob, my son Robert, is more of a man than I could ever be.
The mother of Stacy Moskowitz, who died yesterday, issued this appeal to the killer.
Stop, please stop. Let the young live. Just stop it. Just stop this madness. He's doing nothing but just hurting innocent people. And I'm not talking about the parents now, I'm talking about the children.
Police said today they had no new clues. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
For months at Suburban General Hospital in Norris.
That important?
It's that important.
Stacy Moskowitz was buried today, the latest victim of the .44 caliber killer who has terrorized parts of New York for the last year or so. She and her date were shot on Sunday as they sat in a car late at night, just as the 5 other victims of the maniac were killed. Her date is still in the hospital. And in the neighborhoods where most of the killings have taken place, both the police and the citizens are stepping up the search. Robert Hager has that story.
It's after midnight last night. Police Sergeant Pete Dreyer and his partner Frank Farrell, both in plain clothes, check out a man who was cruising through the neighborhood alone. The man leaves his car. The light reflects off a revolver on the man's hip.
You got a permit?
The man has a permit. He says he's an off-duty private detective. But Sergeant Dreyer has questions.
You always carry your gun off duty?
Yes, I carry permit.
Do you own any other guns?
It's in the downtown Manhattan.
What type of gun is that?
The 38.
38?
Regular service revolver.
You don't happen to know anybody carrying a 44, do you?
Hey.
The man doesn't know anyone with a .44. He's free to go. Other officers cruise the neighborhood in uniform, part of a small army of police assigned to watch for the killer here in the Pelham Bay neighborhood where he struck twice, and in other neighborhoods throughout the city. Neighbors here have also grouped together to ride the streets at night looking for the killer. Among those who patrol is Michael Lauria, whose 18-year-old daughter was killed last summer in the gunman's first known attack.
I want to see this guy caught. I figure if I'm out patrolling one night, I may spot him. I know what goes on in my heart. I know how I feel. How could I say it? I want this guy caught.
The Civic Association riders cruise in well-marked cars. Phil Vasquez, a teacher, would like to catch the killer for the sake of the Lauria girl's father.
I would like to go up to him and tell him, you know, I caught him for you, you know, and for all the other families.
Up the street, Sergeant Dreyer and his partner Farrell are back in their car, which is painted to look like a taxi cab. The sergeant is a little apprehensive about the Civic Association riders.
But I don't think it's just these particular. I think any group of concerned citizens, some of the most well-meaning citizens that you'd come across, I think if they got their hands on this guy, they'd be looking to string him right up on the spot.
At the Civic Association office, the CB radio is busy now.
Yeah, Reggie, underneath the Westchester Avenue near Middletown Road, there's a guy sitting on the street there.
Police, tipped by the Civic Association, pick up a mental patient who's left a state hospital nearby. 4 Civic Association cars were there ahead of the police. Now, policemen Dreyer and Farrell are chasing a suspicious car.
You know, if we're going to get this guy, we got to get the jump on every call.
The speedometer hits 90. The neighborhood sleeps, unaware of the chase. But the man Dreyer and Farrell were chasing turns out to be nothing more than a speeder.
You just managed to go through our homicide zone. We're working on that 44 caliber thing.
Yeah, boy, I got my brother, you know.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
Just slow it down.
All right, thanks.
Nice and slow.
Another routine night is ending for police and angry neighbors throughout the city, and the killer is still at large. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
And that's it for this evening. Good night for NBC News. 71, and would go off after public hearings if the Congress does not object. In New York City today, the police department made public its newest idea of what the .44 caliber killer looks like. In little more than a year, the gunman has killed 6 people, wounded 7. Robert Hager has more on what the police now think the gunman looks like.
Detectives released the artist's new conception to reporters at midday, both a profile and a full-faced view. It's a lot different from previous sketches, but police say witnesses of the killer's most recent attack got a much better look at the gunman. The face is a little leaner than in past drawings. The hair is dark and wavy, the cheekbones are high, and the eyes almond-shaped. The sketch was drawn by police artist William McCormick, whose sketches have helped to solve more than a dozen other murder cases here. McCormick showed hundreds of mugshots to the witnesses, asking them to pick out characteristics that reminded them of the gunman. He says the sketch isn't meant to be an exact likeness, but a general representation.
All we have here is a fellow with wavy hair, dark wavy hair. It doesn't necessarily have to be black. It could be dark brown. No sideburns. Definite eye-line shape here, eyebrow shape. Eyes set back, but not really deep. High cheekbones. Fairly straight nose. A bow-shaped mouth. And a fairly, not a very strong chin, but a reasonably average chin.
Late in the day, the sketch was delivered to policemen all over the city. The public got its first look, and police hoped all this might help. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
My dentures were so
Have details of his arrest, and I think we should go immediately to him. I'm Jane Pauley with Lloyd Dobbins, but first, Floyd Kalber, the news of the arrest of suspect David Berkowitz.
Jane, the man's name is David Berkowitz. He is an unmarried 24-year-old postal worker. He's a veteran of Korean service with the United States Army. When he was arrested late last night in his apartment in Yonkers, New York, he told the officers, "Okay, you've got me." David Berkowitz is expected to be booked, as Jane mentioned, in Brooklyn this morning and formally accused of committing at least one of 6 murders in the New York area in just the past year. Specifically, they expect him to be booked for the murder of 20-year-old Stacy Moskowitz on July the 31st. In the end, a parking ticket proved to be the undoing for Berkowitz. Here's Robert Hager with more of the story.
This is the man police believe to be the son of Sam, the .44 caliber killer who has killed 6 and wounded 7 in a string of attacks over the last 13 months. He was arrested outside his apartment in Yonkers, New York at 10:30 last night and brought to police headquarters about midnight. He is David Berkowitz, a 24-year-old postal worker who lived alone. He was smiling as he was brought in. Detectives displayed a .44 caliber pistol found in Berkowitz's car. The police lab says its tests indicate this was the gun used in the most recent Son of Sam slaying.
Ballistics section has just called and told us that the .44 caliber gun recovered tonight has been tested, and the bullets match the bullets recovered from Stacy Moskowitz.
New York's Mayor Beam appeared after midnight.
I'm very pleased to announce that the people of the city of New York can rest easy this morning because of the fact that the police have captured a man whom they believe to be the son of Sam.
It was Berkowitz's car that led police to him. It had been ticketed for being parked by a fire hydrant on the night of the most recent murder, just a few blocks from the murder scene. Routinely following up the ticket, police found the car in Yonkers and noticed a .45 caliber machine gun inside and an envelope addressed in the killer's style of handwriting.
He was apprehended. He was advised of his rights.
And he resisted.
Advised that he was under arrest, advised of his rights. No, he was resigned to what appeared to be his fate.
Did he make any admissions?
He made a statement along, well, you got me.
Besides the .44 pistol and the .45 machine gun, police seized a lot of ammunition at Berkowitz's apartment, along with a folder of press clippings with a poem written on the outside. The suspect doesn't bear much resemblance to any of the recent artist conceptions used by police, but one sketch drawn over a year ago does bear some resemblance to this Polaroid picture taken of the suspect on this night of his arrest. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
Again, David Berkowitz, accused this morning by the New York City authorities as the .44 caliber killer. He was arrested late last night in Yonkers, a community about 10 miles to the north of Manhattan. Carol Jenkins went there to talk to the people who lived around Berkowitz.
Moving with him.
Well, we've had some sort of difficulty with that report, and we hope to get it to you a little bit later on. Queen Elizabeth continues her visit of Northern Ireland. We will have that story and other news coming up.
NBC News in Israel.
Again, the top news story of this morning is the arrest late last night of 24-year-old David Berkowitz, an unmarried postal worker. He was arrested in his Yonkers, New York apartment, and he is expected to be booked and arraigned this morning in connection with 6 murders in the New York City area over the past year, the so-called .44 caliber killer. We asked Carol Jenkins, one of our reporters, to go to Yonkers to talk to some of the people he lived around and with.
It was well after 3 o'clock when New York City police walked out with what they would only describe as ballistics evidence. Among other things, they had found a .44 caliber revolver, a .45 caliber machine gun, a rifle, and newspaper clippings of the son of Sam murders.
There's very limited amount of furnishing in the apartment. There was just a bed that was on the floor. There's no bedpost. Limited.
A mattress on the floor?
Yeah, mattress on the floor.
Any other furniture?
Just ordinary kitchen furniture. There's nothing really spectacular.
Personal effects, family
All
pictures?
All personal effects, family pictures, pictures of friends, I imagine.
35 Pine Street in Yonkers, a nice building in a nice neighborhood. Apartment 7E was home to David Berkowitz. No one here really knew him, although almost everyone knew who he was. A white man living in a mostly black building. Quiet, perhaps a little strange, but certainly not murderous.
You saw him? You knew him?
Yes, he was nice. He was a nice man. He always said hello and how were you doing and everything. I would never think that he was the son of Sam.
Did you see him when they came in to get him?
Yes, I did. I seen him drive up.
You saw him drive up in his car?
Yes, in a yellow car.
Right.
He drove up, and when he parked, the police, all of them jumped out of the car. They were coming from every direction. They jumped out of the car, and they ran over to him, and they put their guns up to him. They put them up to his head. And
what did he say?
He didn't say anything.
Across the street, there was fear.
Oh, I'm shocked, really. I can't believe that, it happened, that he could be here in this neighborhood. I mean, so, the building's supposed to be a high-class building here, and, I mean, to think that we thought he was in New York.
And not
in Yonkers, and not right across the street from us.
And so it all seems to fit the image most often offered of the .44 caliber killer. A loner, a man nobody really seemed to know, at least not his neighbors here in Yonkers. They thought they were safe. After all, his target seemed to be the Bronx, Queens, and then Brooklyn. Well, now they are afraid when the rest of New York City and the rest of the country is beginning to relax. The people here in this building are afraid. After all, they live next door to the son of Sam. In Yonkers, this is Carol Jenkins, NBC News.
And that's the news, 13 and a half minutes after the hour. Let's get the weather now from Lou Wood. Good morning.
Well, the big news in New York overnight, a man police are pretty sure his son of Sam was arrested in his home in Yonkers and is in police custody now. Perhaps by this hour has in fact been arraigned in Brooklyn. With us this morning is Jimmy Breslin, the New York Daily News reporter and columnist, who was the only journalist to have received a letter from Son of Sam. That came last May, and Mr. Breslin has been deeply involved in the story as a reporter and as a novelist since then, along with our own NBC correspondent, Dick Schaap, who with Mr. Breslin is working on that book. Both of them have been up since the wee hours of this morning following the story, following the arrest of David Berkowitz, who has been identified tentatively as Son of Sam. First of all, this David Berkowitz has been talking to police. Has there been any indication that he was planning yet another attack?
Oh, yeah. Last night. Last night, standing in the hallway, as Dick was and I was, and the detectives would come out and talk to assistant district attorneys that questioned him, said he was going from his house in Yonkers to the Riverdale section of the Bronx, and he was going to do something there. This Sam had commanded him to do it, Sam being apparently a dog that runs his life, and Sam had commanded him to kill there. Then he was going out to the Hamptons to a discotheque and going downstairs with his, going into the place with a machine gun, and he was going to try and go out in a blaze of glory. And I mean, now you're talking, when a fella comes out and tells you a thing like that, you know, you sway.
There's an awful, you said an awful lot. First of all, he was arrested at what, 10:30, which is maybe 2 hours, 3 hours before the time he has chosen to strike in the past. And in his car was found a fully loaded .44 and a submachine gun?
Yeah, with 2 clips.
Submachine gun with plenty of clips.
And it was well loaded too. So he was changing his, how do you say, MO, so to speak. He was going to
go out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah, he wanted to take 40 or 50 people out last night.
He was talking about.
Has he told police that this would have been his last? He would assume after a massive attack like that to have been caught?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think he would want to go on. I mean, hopefully he would want to go on.
Well, tell me more about this Sam. Sam is a dog?
That's what he said. He said they said to him, so who's Sam? And he said, you know who he is. He said, no, come on, I don't know who he is. Who is Sam? He says, you know who Sam is. No, who is he? And Sam's a dog. And the dog tells, I understand the dog, and he can do everything, and he commands me to do things. Well, that's what they told me.
What I heard was just slightly different, was that Sam is a 6,000-year-old something who's almost human, and he talks to him through his dog. It's Sam's dog that tells him what Sam wants. And but he tells you all of this in a very rational, straightforward tone, like, you know, yesterday I went to the grocery and I got 3 boxes of whatever. So this dog talks to me and tells me and gives me a message when I must go out and kill. And he said he has nothing personal against these people, nothing against women. He thinks women are fine, and just that he has to do whatever Sam's dog told him to do.
The attacks then are specified by the dog, but the victims were pretty random?
Absolutely random.
Yeah, there was one in Forest Hills. The college girl was coming home from the subway, and he shot her, but he passed 2 people. He passed 2 people. He didn't shoot them because he was commanded only to shoot her. They said.
Not only
this was some piece of work you walk in the streets here.
When they arrested him, not only did he have the submachine gun in the car and the .44 caliber revolver, but he also had another poem that he had written, which was going to be left for the Suffolk Police Department in Suffolk County, where the Hamptons, where he was going to strike it. And the poem said, because Craig is Craig, so must the streets be filled with Craig. And then after Craig, in parentheses, it said death, Craig meaning death. And then it went on to say, and big drops of lead poured down on her head till she was dead. Yet the cats still come out to mate, and the sparrows still sing in the morning. Which is some very pretty imagery there in the last part of it. And Craig is a man who lives in the same building with him, who's a deputy sheriff of the city of Yonkers, and a man with whom he had been feuding. So,
I like the one thing. I was coming up here in a cab from police headquarters. I'm looking out on the streets, empty, nice morning starting. I was thinking, there's a great deal of talk in this city about illegal aliens in this country. Everybody's they're very bad. We can't have them here. Well, it happens, there was a woman in Brooklyn, 52-year-old woman, was out the night that this fellow, this deranged fellow, Son of Sam, had shot the last 2 people, Stacy Moskowitz, her name was, and her boyfriend. And she had seen the car parked and remembered it had a parking ticket. in the car. And when she told police what she had seen a fellow that night, and she remembered the car and the parking ticket in the car. The parking ticket, it was bingo. That was what they came up with. Now, the cameraman, I understood, cameraman was sitting on her stoop last night waiting to get out of, and she won't come out of the house because she's an illegal alien. She's here with no papers or something. I guess she came here for a visit from Europe, 2-week visa, something, 5 years ago, and stayed here.
Isn't that
now she's afraid they're going to catch her and throw her out of the country.
But isn't that the way it always goes? Incredible police work in the hunt for Sam, and he's picked up on a parking ticket for parking a car in front of
They were doing all that work, though. You've got to give them that.
Oh, sure.
The checking, the constant checking was being done on tickets, on cars, on fingerprints. They had done a tremendous amount of the terrible, tedious office work that, you know, that you don't see on the television. On television, they all come up with the car, squealing, and they jump out, Lieutenant, bang, 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 it's all over. How do you really solve it? Here's one of the worst murderers the world's ever seen. How do you solve it? You go through files looking for license plates.
What do you know about him other than what we know, the details, 24 years old, postal worker, name? Do you know more about him?
He was in the service. He was in Korea. He was not in combat. He did learn how to fire from the combat crouch. He went down to Houston, Texas to visit an Army buddy and bought the gun about 2 months before the first shooting. He bought the gun because it was in his price range. He could afford that or a 38, and he decided to buy the 44.
Machine gun, where in the world did it come from?
That I'm not sure. See, the machine gun has not committed any crimes other than its possession, so I guess they weren't as worried about the machine gun.
Are you surprised at the description of this young man? Does he fit what you might have had in your mind as who Sam must have been?
Yeah, when you looked at his car, saw the things in the car, toothbrush, 2 pairs of shorts, some Lysol, water in a cranberry juice jar, 2 sneakers. The inside of his car it looked like the inside of his head, you know.
Chaotic. Thank you, Jimmy Breslin
Thank you.
and Dick
Pleasure.
Schaap for being with us this morning. And your story on the Son of Sam certainly isn't closed yet. You're reading New York Daily News. Station break.
It's the Phillies against the Cubs or Seattle versus Boston Saturday. Check local listings.
David Berkowitz is the man who police think was Son of Sam, and he was arrested with a smile on his face. Why the smile? Why the clippings in his car? What was he collecting clippings for? Just a few of the questions.
I didn't see clippings there in the
car.
Well,
not in the car, but in his apartment. Apparently, there were the clippings. Well, apparently, I mean, he does not know the difference between right and wrong. I mean, at least that, you know, he doesn't at this moment.
He can't make a value judgment. Yeah, apparently. Everybody seems to say that.
He probably has no realization that he has done something, you know, horrendously wrong, and you know, he's getting probably this great attention for the first time in his life, and he was sort of smiling because I guess he liked getting the attention that he had never gotten before. But I mean, there's going to be an awful lot of, you know, trying to figure out what set this off, what created this demon, this Sam who he invented, because he's going to sit there and talk rationally to an awful lot of psychologists.
What kind of questions were the police asking him last night? What were, say, the first 4 or 5 things they wanted to know out of Sam?
Why did you do it? Who was Sam? You know?
And I think those answers were surprising to, I mean, it wasn't quite what they expected. I mean, an awful lot was surprising.
Did he explain why Craig, his death, what
well,
that is?
He had set a fire in this fellow Craig's apartment at one time. The police in Yonkers knew about him as a guy who was, you know, a bit of a weirdo and cuckoo, but, you know, not homicidal. And so this Craig was a deputy sheriff there. He knew about him. He knew he was one of the cuckoos in the building. But like most buildings in New York, it probably had more than one cuckoo.
Had he ever mentioned Craig before in his letters
that
you know of?
No, that was no. And I mean, if he were going to leave that note, apparently this was the beginning of the end for him, because then the fella Craig would maybe put it together right away as to who this fella was. That's true. You know, that's why maybe this was going to be his, you know, that white heat scene, that Cagney, look at me, Ma, top of the world, he was going to go. You know, you still think, you're sitting here talking, you think the guy was going to go in a discotheque with a machine gun. I mean, my God, we were in terrible trouble with this fellow. Whew.
It's amazing, too, that there just doesn't seem to be any question. Of course, obviously, the man is innocent until proven guilty, but everything locks it up.
Why would he pick discotheques? He was 24 years old, and he's young, and perhaps identifies with them. Maybe he had few friends, and that's where people collected and had fun and partied and whatnot.
You know, I was looking at him tonight. I was looking at him walk last night. I was looking at him walk, and I was looking at his face, round, kind of pleasant face, a little goopy quality to it. But watch, I'm trying to see maybe, you know, could he dance? You know, and apparently he's got balance. He seemed balanced enough to dance. I don't know what his problem was. Why he'd go to discotheques? I don't know.
Is he the same man who would go to discotheques, pick out his victims at the discotheques?
No, apparently.
Or just roam the neighborhoods at night?
No, he roamed.
Yeah.
He roamed. This guy
hunted. The word he kept using was he hunted. And he hunted apparently 30 nights a month.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he only struck once every 40 days on the average, or 45 days, was just, you know, our good fortune, because he was out every night looking.
Looking back on it, was he in fact a sloppy killer, or was he covering his tracks really well? And the last one, he was standing under a street light, and a number of witnesses saw him.
He also said that he ran each time after the shooting. We had always thought all along that he walked.
Nobody had ever seen him run.
Nobody had ever seen anyone run.
I don't know, sloppy. He had a city in fear pretty good. And if he ever got through last night, he would have had a whole region in fear.
When are you going to talk to him?
I don't know, maybe I'll go to Kings County. That's the insane, you know, the mental hospital here. There's Kings County Mental Hospital, and maybe go in there and see him if he wants to see me.
He wrote you once?
Yeah, maybe he'll see me. Yeah, I'll talk.
Have you put in a request?
Yeah, I'll put one in.
With how many other reporters in the city of New York and elsewhere, I should think. Thank you again, Jerry Breslin, Dick Schatt, and we'll see. Station break.
Astaire and Petula Clark.
From the NBC News Center in New York.
Good evening. David Berkowitz, 24, spent his days sorting letters in the post office, so meek and mild and quiet, nobody ever noticed him, and spent his nights, the police say, roaming the streets of New York City with a .44 revolver, shooting young people and killing 6 of them. He has been arrested, and tonight he is in a mental hospital. He had terrorized the city for 13 months. When they brought him in, a crowd gathered on the sidewalk demanding his life. Here are 2 reports.
This is the man police say is the .44 caliber killer. Young, dark-haired, almost chubby. He had a faint smile as police moved him around the city today, from arrest to booking to court, finally to a mental ward. Police were jubilant.
44 caliber bulldog.
Just after midnight, about 2 hours after the arrest, they displayed the .44 caliber pistol they said they found in Berkowitz's car. They said lab tests indicated it was the gun used in the killings. They found a folder in Berkowitz's apartment with a poem written on it in handwriting that matched earlier letters from the killer. They found hundreds of rounds of ammunition and 2 more guns, including a .45 caliber machine gun detectives said Berkowitz planned to use in his next attack, which they said was planned for a Long Island discotheque. In the end, it was something as simple as this $25 parking ticket that led police to Berkowitz. Police had ticketed his car for parking too close to this fire hydrant, a block and a half from the most recent killing, on the same night as the killing, July 31st. A routine follow-up of the ticket led police to Berkowitz's car, parked in front of his Yonkers, New York apartment. And when police discovered the machine gun and a letter in the car, 15 detectives staked out the apartment and car. Chief of Detectives John Keenan tells what happened.
David Berkowitz came out of his apartment house, entered the car, was about to start the car when he was apprehended. He was advised of his rights.
And he resisted.
Advised that he was under arrest, advised of his rights. No, he was resigned to what appeared to be his fate.
Did he make any
made
admissions?
He made a statement along, well, you got me. I want to be careful not to say anything which will prejudice a prosecution. So I'll just say that he made admissions.
For now, Berkowitz is formally charged for only the latest of the .44 caliber attacks. He's accused of second-degree murder, attempted murder, assault, and possession of a deadly weapon. In court for a brief arraignment, Berkowitz was surrounded by dozens of detectives and uniformed police. By now, his face was flushed and his eyes a little puffy, but there was still the trace of a smile. 2 lawyers said they'd been hired by relatives to defend him, and the judge ordered him committed for psychiatric examination. Tonight, Berkowitz is being held here in a specially secured building of the Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn to begin what could be up to 30 days of testing to determine his mental competency. It's the same hospital where Stacy Moskowitz died just 10 days ago. Robert Hager, NBC News, New York.
Following the arrest of David Berkowitz, neighbors in the Yonkers apartment building where he lived for the past year began to piece together their picture of the man police are calling the Son of Sam. What was your experience with Mr. Berkowitz?
I think he was a nice man. He always spoke to me, said hello, how you doing, how do you like the weather. He was very nice, kept to himself.
Did you know the Son of Sam, or the man who police are saying Son of Sam?
I've seen him in the elevator and in the building, up on the 7th floor. I live at the other end of the...
Ever speak to him?
Hello, goodbye, you know, good morning, good afternoon.
Was he pleasant?
Yeah, he would speak and go about his business.
Police said the articles found inside Berkowitz's apartment included a sleeping bag, the only furniture, some unframed art reproductions taped to the wall, and a scrapbook of Son of Sam newspaper clippings. Berkowitz's newspaper boy, 14-year-old Frank Resto, lives just across the hall. Did he resemble to you the sketch of Son of Sam, any of those sketches of Son of Sam that we all became so familiar with?
Nope. Didn't even look like him.
This is Co-op City in the Bronx, the nation's largest cooperative development, and David Berkowitz's home for the 7 years prior to his move to Yonkers. Berkowitz's grandmother, in her 80s now, still lives here. His mother is dead. His father lives in Florida, but when he heard of the charges against his son, he flew to New York today to be near him. The 24-year-old Son of Sam was adopted. He attended Columbus High School in the Bronx. It's closed for the summer, and no one who remembered Berkowitz was around today. Community College came next. It's also in the Bronx, and Berkowitz attended here for almost a year before dropping out, joining the Army, and going to Korea. Students told us that some teachers had retrieved some of Berkowitz's old schoolwork and were passing it around today, mostly poems. David Berkowitz landed a job operating a mail sorting machine at the Bronx post office a few months ago. Co-workers today were shocked to learn that Berkowitz could be the Son of Sam.
He first started working here, it was about 6 months ago. The foreman told me to break him in and show him what to do on, processing the mail and the collection. And we worked together for about 2 or 3 months, and we sat and had coffee together. And he did a lot of, talking mostly about, he liked to go fishing, and he did a lot of reading, he liked to read, I think mostly novels, And the only thing he ever said about the Son of Sam was that he advised one girl to put her hair up in a bun, that she shouldn't wear long hair because that's what Son of Sam was after, girls with long hair.
So to Berkowitz's co-workers and friends and others, the man and his motivation remain a mystery. Gerald Harrington, NBC News, New York.
The thousands of policemen who were hunting for Berkowitz did not know that he had received training as an auxiliary New York City policeman, learning some law and some unarmed defense tactics. He learned about guns in the U.S. Army, where he served as a rifleman in the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea in 1971 and 72. Presumably now he won't use any more guns, and that pleases a lot of New Yorkers. Lee McCarthy has that part of the story.
New York began feeling relief at 1:30 this morning when Mayor Beam announced the arrest.
I'm very pleased to announce that the people of the city of New York can rest easy this morning because of the fact that the police have captured a man whom they believe to be the Son of Sam.
John Deal, whose girlfriend, Christine Freund, was murdered in January, said the arrest was good news for everybody.
I feel very
very good about it, that everybody can walk, you know, or go out with their dates safe again now. You know, some of us had to, you know, suffer through this.
At the Brooklyn home of Stacy Moskowitz, the last person murdered, her mother praised the police, but added that the family's life will never be the same.
It's a very difficult thing to resume anything normal afterward, as far as I'm concerned anyway. You just can't pick up nothing pieces when there's no pieces to pick up.
New Yorkers saw the arrest as a release for New York's young women and their parents.
I was getting a little worried since I have short length brown hair and everything. But now I feel much better.
Oh, I feel much safer walking the streets of New York. Much safer, you know, I can go out at night and go to the discotheques and just feel better about it. I don't have to worry that my parents were very worried that I couldn't go out at night. I was always home, went to sleep early.
I think it's great. Now I feel so much safer about going out at night.
I'm very happy. I have daughters.
So after almost a year of tension and fear, this city's young people and their parents are beginning to relax. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, New York.
This story got big headlines all over Europe and all over the world. In some London newspapers, the headlines were larger than the story of the Queen's dangerous visit to Northern Ireland. The Russians were a little behind the action, however. The government newspaper Izvestia came out today after the capture with a lengthy story explaining why the New York City police were unable to catch the killer.
1 ounce of Total gives you one.
On this Friday.
Taking the day off. Nice. Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everyone. David Berkowitz, the 24-year-old postal worker, alleged to be the night killer known as Son of Sam, is undergoing mental tests under heavy guard in a New York City hospital today. Berkowitz, who was captured late Wednesday night after a year-long police hunt, reportedly has confessed to the string of 6 murders and 7 assaults that terrorized the nation's biggest city. More on that story now from Lee McCarthy.
As news of the arrest of the .44 caliber killer spread, New Yorkers were generally relieved. But at the Brooklyn home of Robert Violante, who was blinded in the killer's last attack, Violante's mother said the arrest left one question unanswered.
All I know I would say to him would be one word: why? Just why?
As people talked about the case on the streets of Manhattan, young women and their parents were once again at ease.
Oh, I feel much safer walking the streets of New York. Much safer, you know, I can go out at night and go to the discotheques and just feel better about it. I don't have to worry that my parents were very worried that I couldn't go out at night. I was always home, went to sleep early.
I was getting a little worried since I have short length brown hair and everything. But now I feel much better.
I think it's great. Now I feel so much safer about going out at night.
It has been a tense, fear-filled year for New York's young women and their families. Now, things are getting back to normal. Lee McCarthy, NBC News, New York.
Berkowitz's court-appointed lawyer, Philip Peltz, spent several hours yesterday with the accused killer and described him as tired and subdued. Meantime, the .44 caliber Bulldog revolver found in Berkowitz's car has been traced to Houston, Texas. And we have more on that now from George Lewis.
Police say the gun used in the killings came from this pawn shop in Houston. It was bought last year by a local construction worker, Billy Dan Parker, a close friend of David Berkowitz. The people who run the pawn shop say they sell a lot of handguns, and they were surprised that one of their weapons was used in the Son of Sam killings.
I was watching the news before I come to work, and, you know, they were talking like I was really glad that they caught the killer, and then I was the one that answered the phone when, you know, the Treasury Department called about the gun, and, like, I was shocked, but, you know, you don't ever think about something like that coming from your hometown, much less your own store, you know.
What precautions do you use to make sure that the wrong kind of people don't buy guns?
Well, you just kind of question a person. Like, you might ask them, like, were you going to use the gun for home protection? Or usually most people don't buy a gun like that for home protection, no, because it's such a big bore. You know, a .44 caliber is a big pistol.
The pistol was purchased for $125. Billy Dan Parker, who refused to be interviewed on camera, told one reporter he bought the gun for Berkowitz because his friend feared he needed protection on the long drive from Houston to New York. Parker, who lives in this house with his parents, was away from home, in seclusion. This morning, New York authorities and agents from the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms plan to question him. George Lewis, NBC News, Houston.
In other news, Cuba's Fidel Castro says he's ready to let about 80